Okay, Frank, we need to do this DVD for the sociology class. What do you think we should do? Should we do education?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. We've covered a lot of information in this area, but we only have 3 minutes to do it.
That's right. It's a very interesting area. There's a history of education, questions of gender, social class and ethnicity. Social class especially has been considered in a number of ways, especially social class and the ability to gain a tertiary education.
That's a huge area. All that field theory and code theories. Why don't we just give an overview of the 3 principal phases of education from the 19th century onwards, with what's going on at the moment with the proposed changes to university fees and the reactions to it. It would be a good idea to get a historical perspective.
Okay, you start.
This is a historical perspective of education in Australia. The mid-19th century saw the start of the development of a universal, compulsory and formalised education system in England and Australia, especially at the primary school level.
From the mid-19th century to just after World War II, there was this development of a liberal humanist approach to education. It was basically knowledge for knowledge's sake. Education was seen as humanising, civilising, shaping general attitudes, outlooks or beliefs, not focused on training. There was a need to have formal education, free from external influences as far as possible. Education, it was said, should be secular, state-funded and run by educational experts. This led to the development of the public primary school system. It wasn't all altruistic. The idea behind it was that the working classes needed to know the value of the current social order and their rightful place in it. The working classes needed to be socialised, otherwise they could fall under the sway of radical ideas. Matthew Arnold, who was an English poet and also an inspector of schools, expressed it as a choice between culture and anarchy.
That is interesting. Well, the next phase saw the development of social democracy in education. It looked at the role education could play in social progress. From the 1950s to the 1980s, education as a way of overcoming the artificial barriers to the natural distribution of ability, especially the effects of poverty, on merit, not on the ability to pay. The Whitlam government introduced these measures in 1973 and abolished tuition fees for tertiary education. The focus was on positive social changes rather than economic benefits.
But from the 1980s to the present, we have this development of neoliberalism in the sphere of education. By the late 1980s, policymakers were less focused on the relationship between education and society and more focused on the relationship between education and the economy. The idea was that we should maximise the efficiency in the delivery of education as a service, so education became part of a service economy. In 1989, the Labor government introduced HECS, which was the idea that students were contributing to their own education financially, and students began to be seen as self-managing investors in themselves. Education and knowledge were now seen as commodities. What also began to develop was this idea of the ability to retrain. It became a significant feature of education. So rather than accumulating knowledge, knowledge became more segmented. This idea of lifelong learning emerged, so that we're always going back to retrain. We always have to, we learn now, not so much a body of knowledge, but a way of learning. So with this emerging concept of lifelong learning and the current changes in tertiary education, will we be able to afford it?